Hello, dear students. Welcome back to the second session of this chapter, Molecular Basis of Inheritance. I had stopped at the experiments on the fact that DNA is a genetic material, and I also had told you about the central dogma. And today, in this session, I will talk about the functions of DNA, various functions of DNA. Okay, to begin with, the process of replication. Process of replication. What is replication? Replication is a process where a copy of the original DNA molecule is synthesized. That is called replication. Okay, a copy of the original DNA molecule is synthesized. In a simple way, a process of xeroxing. You get an extra copy of the original original template. Now, this replication process occurs in the S phase of the interphase. During the S phase of the interphase, synthetic phase. So DNA is synthesized there, and this replication will produce another copy, one more copy of the original DNA molecule. It occurs in all the organisms, prokaryotes, eukaryotes, in all the organisms it occurs. But the way replication takes place in prokaryotes and eukaryotes is something different. Okay, there is variation between prokaryotic replication and eukaryotic replication. And what are the requirements? Requirements mainly are enzymes. Okay, mainly enzymes are needed. The enzymes are needed, then the original DNA molecule is needed, new nucleotides are required, then RNA polymerase or primase is required, that is this. So enzymes like helicase, then primase, then the polymerases, mainly the DNA polymerases. The major enzymes needed for replication of DNA are the DNA polymerases. The number of DNA polymerases will vary from prokaryotes to eukaryotes. In prokaryotes, the number of DNA polymerases present are 5. In eukaryotes, there are 15. Okay. In case of prokaryotes, it is DNA polymerase 1, DNA polymerase 2, DNA polymerase 3, DNA polymerase 5. Among this, the most important enzyme is this. Okay, DNA polymerase 3 will catalyze the process of replication. What about the rest? DNA polymerase 1, 2, 4, 5 are all repair enzymes, maybe to replace the primers or to correct the wrong nucleotides. For all these purposes, the 1, 2, 4, 5 polymerases are used. Among that, polymerase 1 is popularly called the Kornberg enzyme. It is called Kornberg enzyme because that was discovered by Kornberg. And then, in case of eukaryotes, the mainly 3 enzymes like DNA polymerase 1 alpha, DNA polymerase delta, DNA polymerase gamma. These 3 enzymes are very much needed for the process of replication. So this is one difference. Understood? Next, in prokaryotes, the replication takes place continuously. In eukaryotes, the replication takes place at regular intervals. Okay, at regular intervals, the replication takes place simultaneously. In prokaryotes, it starts from one end and gets over at the other end. So it is only one stretch. So what happens during the DNA replication is that the DNA molecule, this is a DNA molecule, This is a DNA molecule. Now during the process, the helicase will sit at one particular place called ori. From ori, it starts functioning by breaking the hydrogen bonds between the two strands, so that two strands are separated like this. Now this is ori. Helicase will act like this. This is 5 dash, 3 dash, 3 dash, 5 dash. Okay, now on both the strands the nucleotides are exposed like this. Nucleotides are exposed. So now what happens, always the addition takes place from 3 dash to 5 dash end. Hence at 3 dash end on both the strands the short fragments of RNA primers are produced by RNA polymerase. So RNA primers are produced by RNA polymerase. Now on one strand, from 3 dash to 5 dash towards the ori, there is continuous attachment of nucleotides producing a new DNA strand, and now you call this DNA strand as leading strand. That new strand is called leading strand. But on the other strand which runs away from the ori, at regular intervals the primers are produced for extra stability. This way, and in between these primers short fragments of DNA are formed, and these short fragments of DNA are called Okazaki fragments. Okazaki fragments, and these Okazaki fragments later will get ligated to each other to produce a lagging strand, to form a lagging strand. Thus a new leading strand, a new lagging strand will be produced, and towards the end of the process you will get two new DNA molecules, and each consisting of an older strand each, like this. Okay, so this is new strand, this is also new strand, while this is old strand, this is also old strand. So in each new molecule a new strand and an old strand will be there. Hence one of the parental strands is conserved in the daughter molecule. Hence the process of replication is called semi-conservative. It is called semi-conservative, and it is also called the bidirectional process because see, here attachment has taken place towards the ori, here attachment has taken place away from the ori. So in both the directions the new molecule has been synthesized. Hence the process is the bidirectional and semi-conservative. So this is how it takes place in prokaryotes. But in eukaryotes, say for example, suppose this is a eukaryotic DNA. In this way it is a eukaryotic DNA. You will find oris at regular intervals like this, in this way, like this, see. So this is one ori, another ori, one more ori. So on each DNA strand simultaneously new strands will be produced. That is how replication takes place. That is in case of eukaryotes. But how to believe that the process is semi-conservative? That was explained by Mendelssohn and Stahl. Mendelssohn and Stahl, who proved that the process is semi-conservative by using the heavy isotope of nitrogen. Okay, heavy isotope of nitrogen like 15N. So what they did was they took Escherichia coli and cultured E. coli cells in a medium containing N15. It is a heavy isotope, in a medium containing heavy isotope of nitrogen, and then carried out the density gradient process and cesium chloride density gradient method, and by that they found that in the first generation of E. coli cells the two new molecules produced in DNA and those two molecules of DNA had one strand as heavy strand. See, this is N15 strand, this is N15 strand, like this. And again in the second generation they found that two molecules being totally heavy molecules and the other two molecules being the hybrids, like this. So this says that the process of DNA replication is semi-conservative. What they did was, again, these two were transferred into a medium containing N14 nitrogen, a medium containing N14 medium, and again they found that in the first generation the new molecules being synthesized in this way, consisting of the lighter strand, like this, see. So this is how they proved that the process of replication is semi-conservative by using the heavy and light isotope of nitrogen. So that is one function of DNA. Second function of DNA is a central dogma where the DNA produces RNA. So that process is called transcription. That process is called transcription. So transcription is a process where RNA is produced by using the template of a DNA molecule. So before going into the transcription, we need to know about RNA molecules. I won't go into the details of RNA again because construction of DNA we have already studied in the previous session, and this construction of RNA is exactly the same as that of DNA. Here also nucleosides, nucleotides are produced, but nucleotides are different, not DAMP, DGMP, DCMP, DTMP. Instead it is AMP, adenosine monophosphate, that's all, no deoxy. Okay, ribose monophosphate, adenosine monophosphate, guanosine monophosphate, cytidine monophosphate, and uridine monophosphate. Instead of thymine, here it will have uridine. So that is very important point. Okay, so there will be uridine monophosphate. So 4 nucleotides. Again, the linkage is the same, 5' to 3' direction only. But here hydrogen bonding does not take place. So 2 strands are not combining together. That's why most of the times RNAs are single stranded. Exceptions are there. RNAs are single stranded. And you should also know that RNA is the first genetic material. If you consider viroids, they were RNAs. If you consider plant viruses, they were having RNAs. So first genetic material was RNA. Thus, this RNA is always obtained from the template of DNA molecule. And how many types of RNAs are there? How many types of RNAs are there? There are mRNA, rRNA, tRNA. mRNA is also called messenger RNA, rRNA is called ribosomal RNA, tRNA is also called transfer RNA or soluble RNA, sRNA. Soluble RNA or sRNA. Okay. And what is the function? Messenger RNA will carry the message for a protein from DNA to the ribosomes. rRNA is a structural component of ribosomes mainly, and tRNA transfers the amino acid or carries the amino acid to the ribosomes, which are for construction of protein molecule. And in a cell, major amount of RNA is rRNA to about 80%. Large amount of RNA among all the three is rRNA, making it to 80%. And next is tRNA, almost 15%. And very small amount is mRNA, only to 5%, and it is very short-lived, very temporary. Very temporary. Immediately after the protein construction, mRNA gets dissolved. But long lasting is rRNA. Even this is also quite, to a certain extent, it lives for some period. Then it gets regenerated, or new molecule of tRNAs will be synthesized. And that is one. Secondly, mRNA is always a single stranded. mRNA is always a single stranded. It never forms the double hydrogen bonding. And there are two types of mRNAs. One is monocistronic mRNA. The other is polycistronic mRNA. Monocistronic mRNA and polycistronic mRNA. What is the difference? Monocistronic mRNA is found only in eukaryotes. Polycistronic mRNA is found in prokaryotes. One. Secondly, monocistronic mRNA gives information for only one protein, while polycistronic mRNA will have the information for many proteins. See, this is monocistronic mRNA. Now this is polycistronic mRNA. See, this is for one protein, this is another protein, one more protein. So one single mRNA will have the message for more than one protein. So polycistronic, which is common in case of the prokaryotes. So that is the mRNA. Then rRNA, which is a component of ribosomes. Say for example, this is a ribosome, right? This is a ribosome. Now this ribosome, this structure, this skeleton is by rRNA. This skeleton is because of rRNA. rRNA with the proteins that will form this skeleton. Understood? And each has got further many types of rRNAs. If you want, you can note down. See, there are different types of rRNAs, right? 80S type of ribosome and 70S type of ribosome. 80S type of ribosome has the larger subunit as 60S, smaller subunit as 40S. 70S ribosome has larger subunit as 50S, smaller as 30S. Now, this 60S ribosome is made up of 5S rRNA, 5.8S rRNA and 28S rRNA. See, three types of rRNAs are there. In case of smaller subunit, there is 18S type of rRNA. 18S type of rRNA. Then in case of prokaryotes, the 50S ribosome is made up of 5S rRNA and 16S rRNA, while the 23S rRNA, the smaller subunit, is made up of 16S rRNA. So which is common here? This is common. 5S type of rRNA is common for prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Plus, in prokaryotes, this 23S type of rRNA will act as an enzyme called ribozyme. It acts as an enzyme called ribozyme for the construction of a peptide bond between the two successive amino acids inside the ribosome. So this acts as ribozyme only in case of prokaryotes. Next, coming to tRNA. The tRNA, which is nothing but transfer RNA, is present in the cytoplasm. Each tRNA is very, very specific to each amino acid. So the relationship between amino acid and tRNA is very, very specific. Suppose a tRNA that has to carry methionine does not carry the phenylalanine. The one which has to carry phenylalanine does not carry tryptophan. So it is very, very specific. And the structure of tRNA has been studied by a scientist called Holley. Okay, he has studied the structure of a tRNA, and that structure of tRNA molecule In two-dimensional view, it looks like a leaf of clover. But in three-dimensional view, it looks like L shape. If you watch the videos of tRNAs in the YouTube, you will find these L-shaped tRNAs. That is the three-dimensional view. In two-dimensional view, it looks like a clover, the leaf of a plant called clover, and that clover leaf model was proposed by Robert Hole. And according to this clover leaf model, each tRNA has got 4 arms, and in each again there are 4 arms, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each arm is having a loop and a stem. This is the stem. 1, 2, 3, 4 stems are there. The terminal end is the loop. This is one loop, another loop, third loop. And one arm doesn't have any loop. And also remember, loop is made of unpaired nucleotides, unpaired bases. Stem is made up of paired bases. Base of this has paired with the base of this. Base of this is paired with that of this. But here all the bases are unpaired. And these have 4 names. This arm is called acceptor arm. This arm is called T5C arm. This arm is called anticodon arm. And this arm is called DHU arm, dihydroxyuridine arm. And job of acceptor arm is that, see, 3' end of this stem is extended beyond 5' end by 3 bases. And there is an attachment site, amino acid attachment site. So amino acid attaches here, so it accepts an amino acid. Then the stem is made up of 7 paired bases. 7 paired bases. T5C, the stem is made of 5 paired bases. And this is made of 7 unpaired bases. Like this. Even this is also made up of 5 paired bases. And this is 7 unpaired bases. This way. And these 3 are called anticodons. And this stem is made up of 4 paired bases, and the loop is made up of 10 unpaired bases. Like this. 10 unpaired bases. Understand? Anticodon identifies a particular codon on mRNA. That is a job. The DHU arm will help the attachment of amino acid to acceptor, while T5C arm will help in the attachment of tRNA to the larger subunit of ribosome. So that is the job of tRNAs. So this is the clover leaf model. So approximately each tRNA will have or is made of about 80 nucleotides by and large. Slight variations will be there from one to another, and only tRNA will show the base pairing in these cases. Loops are unpaired, but stems are all paired. Understood? So base pairing is seen in the stems of tRNAs. Thus, we have studied the details of all RNAs. And these RNAs, as I mentioned now, they are produced by a process of transcription. Different part of the nucleus will produce the RNAs, mRNA from the euchromatin region, then tRNA from heterochromatin region, rRNA from nucleolus. So from different parts of the nucleus, the RNAs are produced by transcription. So during transcription, what happens is that actually a DNA will have something called transcriptional unit. Okay, there is something called transcriptional unit both in prokaryotes and eukaryotes. That transcriptional unit will have three components. That is second is the structural gene. First is the promoter site. Second is the structural gene. Third is the terminator site. So these are the three regions. For example, suppose this is a DNA strand. On this DNA strand, this is 3'N, this is 5'N. Now this is called promoter site. This is called the terminator site. And the sequence in between promoter and terminator will be considered as structural gene, which is responsible for a particular protein. And always a factor called sigma factor will attach to promoter site to initiate transcription, and to terminator site a factor called rho factor will attach to release the polymerase from the DNA molecule. So RNA polymerase will, the transcription is catalyzed by RNA polymerase. That RNA polymerase, when binds the promoter site, must be combined with sigma factor so that the transcription is initiated. Then RNA polymerase moves on the structural gene, during which the new strand of mRNA is synthesized. When RNA polymerase reaches the terminator site, the rho factor will attach to it and RNA polymerase released from the unit. Got it? So this is the transcriptional unit. Then what happens during the process? Now suppose this is a DNA molecule. If this is the gene to be transcribed, only that part gets opened due to the action of helicases. So now what happens is that, see, like this, only that length is opened. Now this is 3'N, this is 5'N, 3'5'. Again, attachment, construction is always from 3'end of the DNA to 5'end of the DNA. So 3'end of the DNA to 5'end. So construction will take place on this strand. So this strand on which the RNA is constructed is called the template strand. And the other DNA strand of which is not used for RNA construction is called coding strand. So template strand and coding strand. So now what happens? This is promoter site, this is terminator site, sigma factor attaches, RNA polymerase attaches, and a new RNA is constructed like this. And as RNA polymerase reaches here, the rho factor attaches, RNA polymerase is relieved. Thus, now this is called mRNA, new mRNA is synthesized. Got it? So this is in simple the process of transcription. But the process of transcription is differs from prokaryotes to eukaryotes. What is the difference? Prokaryotic transcription and eukaryotic transcription. There are differences. What are the differences? Very importantly, in prokaryotes, only one RNA polymerase is used. Only one RNA polymerase is used for the construction of all the three RNAs. mRNA, tRNA, rRNA are all produced by only one RNA polymerase. But here there is something called division of labor. There is division of labor, means for each type of RNA there is a distinct RNA polymerase. What is that? RNA polymerase 1, RNA polymerase 2, RNA polymerase 3. So 3 RNA polymerases are there. RNA polymerase 1 mainly produces rRNA, 2 produces mRNA, 3 produces tRNA. See. Now this is called division of labor. There is no such division of labor in case of prokaryotes. That is one. Second difference is that prokaryotic DNA is homogeneous. Prokaryotic DNA is homogeneous, while eukaryotic DNA is heterogeneous. Heterogeneous DNA. Why? Because this DNA in its length has got 2 types of sequences. One is called introns, the other sequence is called exons. So 2 types of sequences are there. What is the difference between the two? For example, see, suppose this is a DNA molecule, some length will be intron, some length will be exon, again some length will be intron, some length will be exon. See, like this. So introns and exons will alternate on a DNA strand. What is the difference? Introns are non-coding sequences. The sequences are there, but they do not produce any protein. Exons are the coding sequences which are actually responsible for the formation of a protein molecule. So now this is the heterogeneous nature of DNA. Such thing is not there in case of prokaryotes. So that is why in case of eukaryotes, what happens is that during transcription, this is DNA. This DNA produces by transcription a hnRNA. hnRNA is nothing but heterogeneous nuclear RNA consisting of both introns as well as exons. Introns as well as exons. Got it? Now, this hnRNA later undergoes maturity or maturation, wherein the introns are deleted and exons are ligated. See, exons are ligated. So this is another difference. So here no maturation of mRNA. That is another difference. Fourth difference is that this mRNA, the matured mRNA, mRNA undergoes capping and tailing. Capping and tailing. But this does not undergo capping and tailing. Does not undergo capping and tailing. What is capping and tailing? The capping occurs at 5' end of the mRNA, tailing occurs at 3' end of mRNA. One. Secondly, capping is nothing but attachment of the methoxy guanosine triphosphate. Methoxy guanosine triphosphate will be attached at 5' end. So, see, this is 3' end, 5' end. Now, this is 5' end, 3' end. This is also 5' end, 3' end. Now, at the 5' end, methoxy guanosine triphosphate will be attached. And at 3' end, adenylic acids or polyadenosine chain will be formed, attached like this. Now this is called the eukaryotic matured mRNA with the cap and tail. Such things are not there in case of prokaryotes. So these are all the various differences between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic mRNA. Now, mRNA is ready. Whether it is prokaryote or eukaryote, mRNA is ready. Right? Now what has to happen? Imagine this is mRNA. mRNA has got the base sequences. This is 5'N, this is 3'N. These are the base sequences. Now the transcription is over. This mRNA undergoes translation. After translation, these sequences are transformed into the sequences of amino acids, thus to produce a protein molecule. So, information on mRNA will be transformed into the product in the form of a chain of amino acids called proteins. But how these sequences will be transformed into these amino acids, how that interpretation takes place, that is by a concept called genetic code. Genetic code. What is that genetic code? Genetic code, that name was introduced by a scientist called George Gamow, and who told that the information, the secret language for proteins stored on mRNA is called a code, genetic code. Okay, the secret language for the life, secret language for proteins stored on the DNA molecule is called genetic code. And this genetic code term was coined by George Gamow, and he told that each amino acid must be coded by a set of bases. See, we have 4 bases: adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine. Not that each will be each base will be coding for an amino acid. No, it should be a set of certain number of bases, and finally it is proved that Nirenberg or Khorana all have done various experiments and have proved that each amino acid is coded by a set of 3 bases, and that set of 3 bases is called triplet code. Triplet code. And the term code is used for the information present on DNA. Information present, this is for DNA. Codon is the information present on mRNA. Anticodon is the information present on tRNA. Okay, so codon is corresponding to code, anticodon is corresponding to codon. So you should be careful with this, because if you will be given a sequence in the exam paper and you will be asked to write the codon or anticodon, so and so. So you should first find out which is given, whether code is given or codon is given in the paper, that you should find out first. Now, these triplet codons of mRNA will be read or will be converted into amino acids. That means we have totally 64 triplet codons, of which 61 codons will read for 20 amino acids. Remaining 3 will be considered as terminator codons. They are also called nonsense codons. Okay, so 20 amino acids are read by 61 triplet codons, and such a nature is called redundancy or degeneracy, because one amino acid may be coded by more than 1 triplet codons. There are some amino acids are coded by 6 triplet codons, some by 5 triplet codons, some by 4, some by 3, some by 2, some by only 1. So that condition is called degeneracy or redundancy. And there is universality. The one particular code, say for example AUG, always codes for methionine in all organisms in all the parts of the world. That condition is called universality. But exception is the human mitochondrial gene. Okay, exception for universality of genetic code is present in the mitochondria of the human cells. Okay, then there are initiator codons. AUG is always the initiator codon. Sometimes GUG acts as initiator codon. There are terminator codons like the UAG, UGA and UAA are the three terminator codons. Okay, that means these three codons do not code for any amino acid. So there is no ambiguity. It is common as so many conditions or characters are there for genetic code. Thus, based on the sequence present on mRNA, the particular type of amino acid will be attached, and that will be done by the rRNA as well as tRNA. So that's about the genetic code. The genetic code is triplet, has been proved by many people like Nirenberg or Mathias or Hargovind Khorana, and so many experiments have been done. I am not going into all those details. We also have something called Wobble hypothesis. Wobble hypothesis means, see, this is mRNA, this is tRNA. This is tRNA. One particular codon will be read by one particular anticodon. Suppose this is AUG, this will always be UAC. Okay, so all are complementary to each other. Sometimes that may not happen. This third base of the codon may be attached by some other codon like this, some other anticodon. So there is an adjustment with the third codon and a third member of the codon and anticodon. That adjustment is called Wobble hypothesis. It is corresponding to only the third base of the codon and anticodon. And with all these backgrounds, let us start with translation. Translation is also called protein biosynthesis or gene expression. So this translation occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell using ribosomes. So what happens is that during the translation, first of all, an amino acid is activated by an ATP molecule producing an amino acyl complex. Now this amino acyl complex will attach to a particular specific tRNA molecule to produce what is that called? Charging. To produce a charged tRNA. Now this charged tRNA, see, this is a charged tRNA. This charged tRNA will have a particular amino acid at the attachment site of acceptor arm. So this is called amino acylation of tRNA, also called the charging. After the charging process, the next maturation occurs in the cytoplasm where the mRNA will be attached by, this is 5-N, will be attached by a smaller subunit of ribosome. And here there will be 6 amino nitrogenous bases or 2 sets of codons, and this will be later attached by a tRNA like this, and to this the larger subunit attaches like this. And we should also remember that in the larger subunit of ribosome there are 3 sites like this. They are E site, P site and A site. Exit site, peptidyl site, amino acyl site. Now look at this. This first tRNA is always present at the P site. A site is vacant. And this is always the initiator codon. Hence this is always methionine. Methionine. Got it? Now P site is vacant, A site is vacant. To the A site, a new charged tRNA will come and occupy like this. So now the bus is full. A site and B site are full. Next, what happens is that in between these two, there is a peptide bond formation taking place. Peptide bond formation takes place between the amino acids of P site and A site. Once the amino acids are connected, then this tRNA goes out of the complex. Then there is a process called translocation, wherein the ribosome moves on mRNA to the next triplet codon. At that time, it becomes like this. See, mRNA, on the mRNA, the ribosome will move. So in this way, the ribosome will come to the other end by translocation, and by this time, a long chain of amino acids must have been formed. See, like this. A long chain of amino acids must have been formed. So now this is the terminator codon UAA or UGA or UAG. So on this there is no attachment of our tRNA, hence the process stops here. So here the process ends. After that, larger subunit, smaller subunit all will detach, mRNA will also get dissociated, and finally only the long chain of amino acid remains. Now this is called protein molecule. This is called protein molecule. Okay, protein molecule is synthesized. Got it? So this is how the process of translation occurs in the cytoplasm. Hence the process of translation is guided by so many enzymes. Lots of enzymes will be there, minerals will be there, ATP will be there, okay, and so many processes, minerals, ATPs, etc., etc., etc. And always the process is guided by the codon sequence on mRNA. Sometimes some inhibitors will be there acting on the process of translation, which are the antibiotics like chloramphenicol, streptomycin, all these kinds of inhibitors, antibiotics will act as inhibitors, blocking the process of translation. Now, so translation is over. But the thing is that proteins will not be synthesized whenever we want, whenever the ribosomes are free. No. So there is a controlling mechanism, regulating mechanism for the process of protein synthesis. That regulating mechanism is called operon concept. So there are operons for each gene which will control the process of protein synthesis. What is an operon? Operon is a combination of structural genes, the combination of structural genes plus other genes like promoter gene, then regulator gene or repressor regulator gene, etc., etc., etc. So many genes will be there, promoter gene, then regulator gene, so many genes will be there which will totally control the expression of the structural gene. So this work has been done elaborately by two scientists, Jacob and Monod, and they have worked on the Escherichia coli cells considering the lac operon model, lac operon corresponding to lactose. So that operon is called lac operon, and this lac operon is an example for positive regulation. It can also be an example for negative regulation, can be negative regulation also. So what happens here is that lac operon has got, this is the operon. So Z, Y, A, then this is the regulator gene, this is the promoter gene, and uh, there is one more gene here, that is the, okay, and now what happens is that the presence of lactose, now this will keep on producing the repressor molecule. The presence of lactose molecule will act as the inducer molecule. So this inducer molecule will combine with the repressor molecule and it will produce an inducer repressor complex. So this inducer repressor complex cannot bind to the promoter site, so that RNA polymerase can bind and the process of transcription can take place. mRNA may be produced. Okay, so this is hence the presence of lactose will stop, so it is positive. Or it can be negative if the repressor stops the production of mRNA, that is the negative. And another example is there for operon, that is called tryptophan operon, which is an example for negative operon, which is also called repressible operon. Repressible operon. Okay, this is inducible operon. Presence of inducer will carry out the process of translation. Presence of repressor molecule tryptophan, presence of tryptophan will stop the protein synthesis. Okay, so these are the two examples for two types of operons. Next. So these are all the various functions of a DNA molecule: replication, transcription, translation, and the regulation mechanism using operons. Okay, so this is what you need to understand. In a very, very brief way, I have gone through all these things. Next, the next process, we have two application systems. In the syllabus you have been given two application systems. One is Human Genome Project. The other is the DNA fingerprinting. DNA fingerprinting. Right. Now what is Human Genome Project? Genome is a collection of all the haploid set of chromosomes of a particular cell, of a particular organism. Okay, collection of this group of all the haploid set of chromosomes is called genome of a particular organism. Here it is the genome of human beings, that is 23 chromosomes. What is that project? Unveiling all the informations present on 23 chromosomes of a human. So see, we have 23 chromosomes like this, and on these 23 chromosomes we have so many genes. So what are these genes? What is the size of the genes? What is the sequence of these genes? What are the products of these genes? What are the effects of these genes? All these things have been worked out in this Human Genome Project. It was started in 1993 in America. Okay, and it was joined by many other countries like Japan, Germany, France in the initial stages, and gradually many more countries also joined the project. And the project initially was considered to be a 7 years project, but it got over in 2001 itself. A 13 years project started in 1990, but it got over in 2001 itself. Okay, so this project has actually utilized two types of steps, two types of processes, methods. One is expression sequence stats, the other is sequence annotation. Two types of methods were followed. What are they? In express sequence stats, only exons were taken. Only exons were taken, and their activities were studied in detail. In sequence annotation, both introns and exons were considered, and they were copied, and one single fragment was studied by many people, and they were annotated using the computer devices, sequencers, and ultimately the entire sequence was unveiled. The effective method was this sequence annotation, and using this lots of new findings came out. That the first thing is that 46 chromosomes have got about 2000 almost 30,000 genes, and the largest chromosome being chromosome number 1 with 2300 genes, smallest being Y chromosome with only 2600 almost, and this is almost 2230 genes on Y chromosome, and majority of the sequences are junk genes which do not code for any amino acid. So exons almost up to 1 to 2%. Largest gene is for a protein called dystrophin, for the protein called dystrophin, the largest gene. So many new findings were done. That is in case of Human Genome Project, and lots of today we have so many genome projects being done on different organisms. And the first prokaryote on which the genome project was done was Haemophilus influenzae, and the plants are Arabidopsis plant. On this the project has been done. So today animals, plants, most of the things species have been carried out the genome projects. And last is the DNA fingerprinting. It was initiated in 1985 by a scientist called Alec Jeffreys. So it is an analytical technique where the sequence of the DNAs of two individuals will be found out and will be compared to identify some of the important issues, to sort out the crimes, or to identify the siblings, or to bring together the parents and children. So analysis of the DNA sequences of the two individuals is done, and finally the similarities and dissimilarities are analyzed. And in this technique, what is the basis? Basis is called VNTR. VNTR is nothing but variable number of tandem repeats. These variable number of tandem repeats are nothing but the mini satellites. What are satellites? Satellites are nothing but the repetitive sequences. Repetitive sequences present on our chromosomes are called satellites. These satellites are of two types, microsatellites and mini satellites. Mini satellites are nothing but VNTRs, variable number of tandem repeats, and variable number of tandem repeat means one single sequence will be found in multiples on different lengths of the chromosomes. That is called variable number of tandem repeat. And due to polymorphism, we have got so many types of VNTRs, small minute changes between the sequences, and that is how the changes have been found. And this process is carried out in different steps. What is that? First, the sample is collected. That sample may be semen, hair, saliva, blood, whatever, and then it is processed in where the DNA is isolated by a process called centrifugation, by treating with the restriction endonucleases. Okay, so after the DNAs are isolated, DNAs are broken down now the breaking is done by using the restriction endonucleases, and again they are separated by agarose gel electrophoresis. These separated DNA fragments are then subjected for Southern blotting, wherein they are made single stranded and are filtered through the nitrocellulose filter. These single stranded DNAs which are resulted after Southern blotting will be subjected to the probing with the radioactive DNA. So now radioactive DNAs will match with the, will combine with the complementary DNA single-stranded DNA fragments. And once the probing is done, then they are subjected to autoradiography where X-ray photography is taken. And once the photography is taken, then they are compared for similarities and dissimilarities in the sequences. So this is how the process is carried out. Understand? Thus, DNA fingerprinting has been of great use in solving many issues between parents and children, or between siblings, or in the crimes. So many issues. Understood? So this is in brief the process of DNA fingerprinting. Got it? So this is in brief about the chapter of molecular basis of inheritance. This chapter is very, very important because lots of questions are asked every year from this chapter. Major number of questions will come from this chapter, both for CET as well as for NEET. So study well. I have gone through in a very brief way. Now details you only have to collect. Thank you.